And let me get the live stream going. There we go. Come on. Do your video. Okay. Let's see. What is going on with my Zoom? All right, more. There we go. All right. Of course, I had everything set up and now it's deciding it wants to play.
Of course.
You know how it is.
Yep.
All right, we're gonna get this started here in just 1 sec. I can go back and I'll clean up the other parts. So letting the live stream load up. Because I know there's a lot to talk about on this topic.
Oh, I know it.
All right. And we are good to go. Okay, so we are here for the very first TC talk. And we are going to talk to Chuck Piro about home hardening and NHDs. And he is from Disclosure Source. So Chuck, I'm gonna let you get started with your 30-second elevator speech about you and what you do.
Okay, thanks, Sam. And I appreciate being invited on to this forum this morning. I've been in the NHD industry since it started in 1998. After a short career in title insurance, I saw an opportunity in a new industry and I jumped on it. And fortunately for me, I work for one of the top companies in this industry at Disclosure Source, which is a Fortune 500 company, which is a great benefit to those who use us, because in this industry that's not regulated by the government, there are a lot, as a matter of fact, way more non-qualified entrepreneurs that are producing these reports than there are from legitimate companies and big companies like Fidelity. So I'm fortunate to be a part of that family and have been for the last 20 years. And that would be my introduction to me and my company. I've been doing this a long time. I travel all over the state of California and have for the last 20 years, giving presentations in real estate offices, talking to brokers. And of course, I'm the consultant at my company when clients call, whether that be agents or sellers that have questions on NHD reports or buyers. And I've always tried to take a common sense approach to my job and talking language that people can understand, and take the fear away from anything that might be on a natural hazard disclosure report.
It is some scary information when you're first looking at it. It's a lot of overwhelming bits and pieces. And I know you've been great about talking to my different TC meetings and groups before. Specifically right now, we know the new topic with home hardening. What's your guidance on how to move forward with this?
Well, when I looked at the home hardening law that came out, I looked at the CAR form, and it's called the HHDA, and I read that form. And I would say, again, over the course of my career, I've become more of an advocate for sellers and sellers agents in doing what the right thing to do is. And when this form came down the pipe, and this is that HHDA, I read this, and the form and the disclosure applies to homes that are in high or very high fire hazard severity zones. And I think to myself, well, what about moderate fire zones? And what about any fire zone? Why does it have to be designated high or very high? When CAR says in this form itself, even if the property is not in either of the zones specified above, which is high or very high, if the seller is unable to determine whether the property is in either of these zones, if the property is in or near mountainous areas, forest-covered lands, brush-covered lands, or grass-covered lands, or land that is covered with flammable material, a seller may choose to make the disclosures below because a buyer may find that information material. It goes on to say a seller may voluntarily make the disclosures in paragraphs 2 and 3, even if not mandated by law. So I look at that first sentence and it says, even if the property is in or near. You know, when I see a term like near, it makes me wonder, what does near mean?
It's subjective.
You know, it's such a subjective term. You know, it's like one of my competitors puts in their disclosures, the subject property is in an area of, and I always say, what does area mean? And I find it curious that CAR would put a term like near in here. And I think it's strange that this home hardening is only aimed at properties in high or very high. So our company has decided to put the notice in every single natural hazard disclosure report. And I'm not just not my company. This is kind of going on with all of the top NHD companies in the industry. That we're going to just put the notice in there because A, it's the right thing to do, and B, really the home hardening issue is really a conversation between the seller's agent and the seller. And I can remember years ago when I started in this industry, a broker told me once, he goes, you know, Chuck, we don't get sued for disclosing too much information. It's always the other way around. So today I was listening to a real estate agent talk about this home hardening disclosure and advisory. You know, really, we're not disclosing anything. I don't know why they call it both a disclosure and advisory, but nonetheless, we're going to put it in the report and let the seller decide whether or not they want to go ahead and fill this form out. The seller's really not being asked to disclose anything. The seller's being asked to check off a series of boxes that make the home vulnerable to flying embers and wildfires. And if the seller doesn't know of this stuff, then they don't have to check anything off. They're not required to go investigate this. They're not required to fix deficiencies in the home that make it vulnerable. They're just letting the buyer know that, for example, they might have single pane windows instead of dual pane windows. Maybe their eaves and soffits might be open to a distance that would allow a flying ember to get in. But all they're doing is checking off a list of items on a form. And we don't have anything to do with the form. That's, again, that's going to be the seller's agent that gives that. So we're going to take the safe road. And I think the prudent thing to do, and that is to include the notice in every single report, no matter the severity of the fire zone.
Well, and I know this form is going to be revamped again in June. It's definitely already on the books for the updates. And by 2025, I also know the law states that they will have to, currently now it's what you know, but they're actually going to have to answer those questions and have a little bit more along the lines of the TDS within the next 5 years. I think this is kind of easing us into some of the issues that are going on with the state of California.
Exactly. You're exactly right, Samantha. They're going to ease into more inclusive disclosures. And this is just like phase one. And again, you know, not much happens in our industry in terms of new things coming out. Like it's probably been 15 years since the last new thing came out. And, you know, CAR with this HHDA form is just trying to make the legislature's laws easy to comply with. But this form, I think, is just the wrong thing to give, in my opinion.
I understand. Well, and I also know sitting in on both the CAR training and they did the San Diego for the new laws, it's definitely a situation where you don't have to. It's the biggest thing to me was the fact that it's under the same code as the TDS. So I don't think everybody understands that this can trigger the same right for refuse or cancellation, excuse me, that the TDS can, and the delays of delivering it. So I think that's the thing that I'm concerned about, that it wasn't given the right amount of weight to what this form has this time.
Yeah, it was a pretty quick launch of this thing without much of a preview. And now, I mean, I don't have the answers to these questions, but what about things that are waiting to close right now? Do they have to have this form in there now? And then when you introduce this form, because it's a like a TDS, this opens up a 3-day right of rescission when the buyers get this form. So then this could trigger a lot of cancellations, maybe not, who knows? Look, I know that the real estate market is in high gear right now. It's funny, if I can just interject, funny that when COVID hit us back in March, and I'll just speak for my company, but I know that we're not the only ones. Well, our business just really was cut more than in half. It
Oh,
dumped by almost 60%. And I think nobody knew what the heck was going to happen. And within 2 months, we were writing more business than we did the previous year, and that's continued throughout the year of 2020. And we're off to a great start this year. So the business model of real estate may in fact change with less brick and mortar stuff, and because we've realized that people can work from home. I know for me, it's meant less travel, and I tell you, and it's not fun hopping on airplanes on a Sunday night to be at a Monday morning meeting in San Francisco. But for that, I'm kind of grateful. But at the same time, our business, as I'm sure our competitors' business, is thriving right now. And this new form, it might put the brakes on a tiny bit, but we'll get over this hump and this thing will be fine.
now when did that go into effect that you'll have that verbiage in your reports?
Well, right now, I just talked to my manager up in my office, one of the guys that run the IT department up there, and we're trying to get it in there today or tomorrow.
Okay,
So
great.
it'll be in there.
Well, and circling back to what you were saying about adding it, I know from at least the 2 trainings I sat in so far, again, everybody needs to verify with the broker of record on any file they're working on. But my understanding is because it went into effect January 1, it should be utilized even if you're already under. That's why the form was released in December, to be incorporated for any files closing in January. However, again, as we're discussing, I don't think there was enough emphasis on the weight and the importance of what this form does and can trigger with that, because it's now a 5-day cancellation of right of cancellation in the file.
Right.
The RPA
right.
10, I think. So
Right.
yeah.
And by the way, just to be clear, on January 1st, the report from Disclosure Source, we were in complete compliance with the law, in that the notice was placed in reports where the property was in a high or very high fire hazard severity zone. And it was my insistence that it didn't make sense that we would not include this in locally identified fire zones. That's the other thing that's wrong with this, because high and very high really referred to state disclosures. And as I'm sure everybody on this call realizes, there are 2 levels of information out there. There's information that comes from the state and federal government. The federal government, in that those are FEMA flood zones, but
Right.
there's state maps, and then there's also local level disclosure. And it was a long time ago when we incorporated locally identified hazard zones in our report, because it was the right thing to do. And like I said, I've become more of an advocate for buyers and sellers and what the right thing to do is for a seller to protect their liability. And that is to give publicly available information. And the fact that I can go down to this planning department in San Diego and I can purchase a map that's made available from the general plan of San Diego County that shows, for example, a lot of landslide zones and earthquake faults in the La Jolla area of San Diego County, yet the state doesn't have that information. And that's why when you get a natural hazard disclosure report and you see on the natural hazard disclosure statement that line that says map not yet released by the state, that doesn't mean there's not a map available. It just means the state hasn't mapped that area. But local government has mapped the area and they make that information available. And it's not just San Diego County. It's Los Angeles County, it's San Bernardino County, it's Orange County, it's all of the large counties in California have a document called the general plan. And within the general plan, there's a chapter called the safety element. And under the safety element, you will find natural hazard maps that were produced by the local agencies, and they make that information available. So when this home hardening thing came out and it talks about high and very high, it doesn't take into account the locally identified fire zones. And when CAR says on here, the seller might want to make the disclosures, even if it's not mandated by law, believe me, if you lived in alpine or a locally identified fire zone, you want to make this disclosure. So back to my point, on January 1st, we were in compliance with the law. But as we thought about it, we thought it was best to make it all inclusive in all fire zones, not just those in high or very high. Because again, as the form says, a buyer may find the information material. And of course they would. They're in a fire zone.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So that's what we're doing. And I'm not going to say, look, I'm not ever going to say we're the only company that does this or that. We're not. I think all the major NHD companies are going to be inclusive in this form being in all the reports, no matter what.
So just closing up on the home hardening, basically the other thing I had learned too, when they did the wood destroying fire advisory, the WDFA, and I'm probably remembering it incorrectly, again, sitting in on the statewide webinars and trainings, and I always verify everything with the broker of record. But I remember when we went through the 2007 fires, everything was evacuated from the 52 to the 78. So at this point, to me, anything in the state of California, nothing's going to be harmed by providing this disclosure, was what Gov Hutchinson had mentioned on his training as well. Verify with your broker of record, but I don't see any harm in just putting it in with disclosures right away.
Absolutely. Because, and I'll tell you one big reason, and CAR even says it, they have a couple of other documents. If you go on their website, they have a document that's called How to Fire Harden Your Home. But one of the things that's always mentioned and that we can't forget is that flying embers can fly a mile away. So you could not even be in a fire zone and your house could burn down as a result of a wildfire. So you're right, Samantha. It's never a bad idea to just put this in there and be done with it.
Now, while I've got you, the one other question I know that you and I've discussed this before, and it's definitely something I think people don't think of, because you see NHDs and everybody thinks they're all the same. And I always like to learn a little bit more about each company. There was the exclusion that you had shown to some of the brokers that are in some of the NHD companies versus what Disclosure Source has. What was that exclusion line about the coverage?
Yes, absolutely. Again, this industry is not regulated. So this allows anybody to get in our industry. And I would say by a vast majority, most NHD providers are unqualified entrepreneurs that are in for the quick money. And the most important pages of an NHD report to me isn't am I in or out of a zone. That's not what the important thing is. The reason why people use natural hazard disclosure companies, to me, is to protect their liability. I don't want to go make, as a real estate agent, I don't want to go make the call whether my property is in or out of a hazard zone. I don't want to go down to the city and look at a map. I'm not qualified to look at a map like that. So they use natural hazard third-party providers for this information to put them in compliance with the law. So, but what happens if the NHD company makes a mistake? That's the thing that people really need to stop and pause and go, wait a second here. I'm using this $70 report. Well, I wonder why they're $30 cheaper than the other guys. I know I want to save my client money, but let me tell you something. Your client's not asking you to save them money on an NHD report. What the seller wants an agent to do is take them through the process so that at the end, they're not exposed to liability. And if they are exposed to liability, what's the responsibility of the company that provided the information to defend me if they make a mistake? So you got to look at the terms and conditions pages. And one of the things that we see a lot is a term in the terms and conditions that says, it's the 2778 clause. And it basically says that, I forget the way that clause reads right off the top of my head, but
I'll also add it too. I'll make sure it's posted on the Facebook.
Yeah. If you have a 2778 clause in the report, what is 2778? 2778 is the NHD's responsibility to defend the report if requested to do so. Well, listen, if you get sued for wrong disclosure, you're going to go to your NHD company and go, hey, you gave me this report. I'm getting sued because you missed this zone. You need to defend this. And they're going to go, well, didn't you read the report? Because we are protected under Civil Code 2778. So if you see a 2778 exclusion in your report, that report's not worth the paper that it's written on. And this is why regulations need to be enforced by some government agency, and that's not the case. Anybody can go purchase data from a data provider, put that information on an NHD report, and then sell it to you. They're not responsible for the information because they didn't research it. They purchased it. So they're not going to take any liability. So they say, then they go to this disclaimer that takes them out of the liability loop and leaves you with nobody there to defend you. And I'm telling you, there's big companies out there that have the 2778 exclusion in their terms and conditions. And everybody should be aware that that is not in their best interest to use that company, excuse me.
No worries. That kind of weather.
Yeah.
Well, I just remember you talking to me about it, and I know there's several, even when you've talked to brokers at different meetings, when you've been out and about back, you know, in the before days, and that it's been shocking that nobody's aware of this. And we think we have these, they say, well, you have $100 million policy, or we have a $2 million policy, but the policy means nothing if you're going along these lines.
Exactly. You know, I've asked attorneys. I went to a Coldwell Banker event one time to listen to their attorney talk. And of course, when the attorney got done talking, you know, everybody rushes the stage because everybody wants to ask the attorney questions that they didn't get in the general forum. And I waited until she was alone, and I went over to her and I asked her if she was aware of California Civil Code 2778. And of course, right off the bat, she didn't know. But what she did is she quickly got on her phone and she Googled it. And she goes, oh, no. You don't ever want to see California Civil Code 2778, ever. And I go, we know it's funny because your sponsor here, there was an NHC company in the back, has that 2778 exclusion in their report, yet they're sponsoring you here. You know, you should be aware before you allow people into your company. You should be aware of this stuff. But, you know, look, I'm not naive enough to think that exclusive agreements between brokerages and NHD companies.
That's I'm more wanting to make sure everybody's educated about what's for their self-education, so that they know what to look for and bring to the attention of the broker, and then they can make that decision from there. But it's definitely, I'm glad you had brought it up to me for something that I look for in different reports when my agents, you know, because people just kind of default whatever's in the zip forms or the templates to these other companies. So it's a key to know to look for that, the 2778 as something to key look for, and then definitely look about the overall for the home hardening, or just some key items to look in. Unfortunately, because it is an unregulated industry, as we know, and it's better to, I want to make sure we're self-educated so we know who to work with.
Right. Yeah. The seller exclusively waives the benefit of California Civil Code 2778. That's the line in the terms and conditions
that you're looking for.
Yeah. The seller exclusively waives the benefit. You know, I look at that and I go, wait a second, time out. What are they exclusive? What benefit are they waiving if they're waiving the benefit of 2778? So what's 2778? Look, I've spoken in hundreds of offices to thousands of real estate agents, and I always ask that question. Does anybody here know what 2778 is and what are you waiving? And never, not once, has anybody ever put their hand up and go, oh, I know what that is. People don't know what that is. And that's why these guys can slip this stuff into their terms and conditions. Then when you go look at it, 2778 is the NHD company's obligation to pay for the defense and to defend the information they provided in the report. Who would waive the benefit of a defense? And the answer is absolutely nobody. And that's why it's important to read these reports, because this is what happens in a non-regulated industry. Hey, everybody, this is not title insurance. You know, title insurance is regulated by the Department of Insurance. And when agents use a title company, they're not really using the title company. They're using the rep. They have a relationship with the rep. And when the rep leaves ABC title to go to XYZ title, the agent typically moves with the rep because the rep is the one providing the service, because the policy is the same thing. That's not what happens in our industry.
That makes a lot of sense.
There you go.
Well, no, I appreciate it. I know that's why I love talking to you, because you get as passionate about this stuff as I do, for making sure everybody's educated and protected. And I hate when things are not shared. So that's why I wanted to start doing these talks. So I'm so glad you came on. Now, thinking through everything you know, is there anything you think TCs should know or do specifically when they're doing their orders, or that they should be aware of with NHDs?
Well, look at it, like any other ordering of a document. First of all, I think that look, I appreciate TCs for the job that you guys do, and somewhat like escrows, I think that agents rely on TCs, knowing that you know more about the stuff they should know. They rely on you as a source of knowledge and information. So the more you know, I think the more valuable you are to your clients. And I
I
know that
completely agree.
you can't direct where business goes, but the more you know, the better off your clients are. And certainly the home hardening thing, I'm not going to say we're the only company that does this, because we're not. And again, the NHD company's only responsible for providing a notice in the report, which I'm sure pretty much now everybody has.
Right.
But you should be aware of the fact that there are companies out there that aren't what everybody thinks they are. Like there's one company out there that doesn't even provide locally identified hazard zones. And it's funny because they say they do, but when you look at the report, nowhere on the report is there anything about locally identified fire zones. So marketing is very deceiving in our industry, with companies making claims that are false and misleading. Look, to me, the best company you can use is my company, because I'm part of a Fortune 500 company. We're publicly traded. We're worth a lot of money. They make a lot of money. And who would you rather have in your corner if you were ever to be sued for a wrong disclosure? Do you want some non-qualified entrepreneur that's trying to figure out a way to get out of this defense? Or do you want a big Fortune 500 company whose best interest is in defending you and getting cleared, with this process?
Well, and
That's
I appreciate that I can contact, and as we all have our individual, as you were saying about the title reps and the relationships, and we know everybody's working towards their own, but I definitely know that you have been a source of knowledge and information for me for years. So I wanted to make sure to share your perspective on this, because I know you do what I do, where you go and basically nerd out on this, your specific topic.
Sam, let me tell you something. I loved talking to your group. Anytime I talk to your group,
Well, thank
I
you.
think I can be a lot more candid in speaking to a group of TCs than I can speaking to a group of real estate agents. Because I can tell you guys exactly what the heck's going on here, with what companies are good and what companies you need to be really careful of. And I haven't mentioned company names today,
Which I
um,
appreciate.
but everybody should kind of know by now, if you've worked with me like you have for as long as you have, what companies you need to be really cautious of.
Definitely.
There you go.
Well, no, I appreciate it. So I'm going to make sure your information's available, and am I able to extend the invite that you were there if anybody has any questions, as you've always been for me?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Hey, look, I want to be part of your team. If I can help you help your clients be better served, that's what I'm all about. Again, I'm an advocate for doing the right thing and for being the best NHC company that we can be for the people that we serve, and that's sellers and sellers agents. That's
Definitely.
where I'm at.
Well, I so appreciate your time as always, and thank you so much for being here. I will make sure I will send you over the link, but if you need anything, let us know. And if any new NHD items come up, can I tap you as the year goes out?
Absolutely. Absolutely,
Awesome.
Sam. I
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much.
All right.
All right, have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye, Jack.
Bye.